right, morning guys. So we're going to do things a little bit differently and end off our series. It's been 28 wonderful weeks for Dustin and I, for sure. I hope for you guys as well. This will be a bit of a half discussion, half teaching time. We wanted to open up to you guys to hear how you guys thought the year went, some of the things that stood out to you. And Dustin and I have been kind of just reflecting a little bit on what this year's look like and what our church looks like today in response to all this. So, do you want to pray?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the sunshine. Thank you for the warmth. Thank you for your church. Thank you that you have never left it nor forsaken it, that you have carried it throughout history through many different trials and circumstances, sometimes of plenty and sometimes of very little. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to study your church, your bride. I just ask for your hand of protection and guidance for us in this small portion of your bride, that we would just grow in our love for you. We would grow in our unity with other believers, and that we would stand firm on the truth and not allow the world to creep in and corrode our beliefs, but that you would empower us to balance speaking to the world and standing firm in your word. We love you. Amen.
So as we look at the year, maybe open up to you guys first. Were there certain sessions that we talked about that were of particular interest to you, that really stood out to you, or you thought were like, oh, this is very interesting, I had never thought of that before? What were some thought-provoking sessions for you guys?
Zero thought-provoking sessions.
I feel bad because I don't remember all the names, but I think my favorite were when you did the people that actually the main was the 3 or 4 that influenced art, Calvin and was it Menno Simons? Was that one? No, you did 4 of them. Anyways, I like those. Oh, yes, thank you. Luther. There we go.
Yep.
Yes. When you did about Luther and Calvin and
Zwingli.
how because you hear those names and then I can actually learn more about them and who those men actually were, and not just those ones were my favorite.
If anybody needs one, Carl has a list of names.
I found almost all the sessions very interesting, and I was very curious about just learning more and more. In the grand scheme of things, it's just amazing that where we are today, in light of all these people who messed up so badly at different times. So it's still very interesting to me.
Dustin, I'll put you on the spot a little bit. As you were kind of going through some of the studies, what was there one thing, one session that you had a particular interest or fascination in, that you learned the most in, or that you enjoyed kind of teaching the most?
I think one of the areas that I enjoyed the most to teach on and to study on was actually the Roman Catholic Church. We spent quite a bit of time a number of sessions. I think we ended up 3 or 4 pretty tied to the Roman Catholic Church. And yeah, I think I just really enjoyed learning who they are and how they believe, a little bit different than we do, but also how we are quite similar and where we come from. And the Bible is full of a lot of tension. I'm going to be speaking on Job in a couple weeks, and we're not going to get a lot of answers actually in that book. And I feel like that's a number of things in the Bible. There's a lot of tension, and God doesn't necessarily tell us exactly the reasons why. And I think I can feel similarly with the Roman Catholic Church. There is a lot of disagreements that we have, but I also feel there's elements of unity that we have. And it's an interesting tension. I don't believe what they believe, but I can also at times call them brothers, right? So it's an interesting challenge.
Do you have, like, in your opinion, the best time in church history? You're like, this part, in the past 2,000 years, this part was the best time for the church in all of history.
I don't know what the best time in church history is. I do know one of my favorite times is when Constantine came to power, actually. I know a lot of people maybe... There can be the sentiment that we should all be persecuted constantly, and prior to Constantine, that was happening quite a bit. But when Constantine came in and allowed Christians to worship freely, and took that a little bit step further, I think Christians had to wrestle very much with church government. Well, not necessarily with church government, government and the church and state. And they had to wrestle with that, and it was very new, and I think I can relate to that. I feel like the time that we're living in now, I see the echoes in that time with Constantine, where we are very free. We actually get tax benefits when we donate to a church, right? The assumption by the government is that a church is good for the world and for its country, so we don't need to pay taxes for anything that you're contributing to the church. And we're not getting persecuted. And so I would say there's a lot of echoes between that period and our period. And so in that's one that I really appreciated, where I can maybe resonate with. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I think that when I was reflecting on that, like what was the best time in church history? I think it was, I could be argued out of this, but like, I think it was actually when Christianity was illegal. Because, so like, up until 325, or 316, when Constantine came into power, Christianity was illegal, and there seemed to be a lot more black and white. Because after Constantine, the church started integrating with the state, and it didn't ever stop. And it just kept on like getting more and more one as time went on. And I think that beforehand, there was a lot more of like, I don't know, what some people would call like a pure church. And so where there was heresies that they were dealing with, but the things that they were dealing with that were like false teachings, it would be kind of like, as a whole, we all know what we believe, but then there would be a false teaching that would come in and would get corrected. Whereas when the church started integrating with the state, now all these like political things were going up in the air and getting into question. And so there was this like murkiness that was going on in the waters.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So the first council was under Constantine. So it was the first time that the church could actually make a stance on heretical beliefs. So I'm just curious. I'm curious how under persecution we can attack, or we can maybe how, as a persecuted church, can we actually defend ourselves against heresy?
Yeah, I think that's. I think under persecution, it seemed like there was a greater need for unity. Whereas, like, when the church got more comfortable, it seemed like the more the church got comfortable, the more heretical things started, like, creeping in, and they just stayed there. And then there would be, like, divisions in the church. Whereas before, there seemed to be one more overarching church model that the divisions that happened, they didn't really last very long. But after, like, Constantine, when there'd be divisions, like, they would stay. Like Arianism was one of them. Like, Arians, like, that was like the Council of Nicaea. That was the whole reason, the Council of Nicaea was the whole reason they were dealing with these Arians. And after that, the Arians kind of got, like, swept out. But then they came back, and people were realizing, oh man, they're actually still here. And they came back, and they, like, totally changed the way we saw the church, especially, like, as the Holy Roman Empire started.
Can I ask? I'm going to derail this one more time, because I think I think we're going down a thread here that I think is interesting, especially in church history, and that is, Jordan, what is more important, purity or unity in the church?
What's the difference?
What's the difference between purity and unity? So you talked about the church under persecution being more pure because there's more, like, it's kind of clean cut. Like, if you're on the fence about Christianity, you're probably not going to come to church if you're going to get your head chopped off, right? So we have purity there. But in unity, I'm thinking throughout all of church history, we have the division, right, of different, because the division comes, if we look at church history, the division comes when we feel like the church that we're a part of, there's people there that don't believe the right thing, so we need to break off and become pure again. So, but I would say, let's say with the Roman Catholic Church, there's kind of a forced unity in that this is what we believe, and we just kind of encapsulate people. And I think this is something that we all have to wrestle with wherever we are, and whichever denomination we're in. What is that balance between unity and purity? Because if we fight for purity, what tends to happen is we break apart. And if we fight for unity, what tends to happen is we maybe go lax on some of our beliefs.
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say purity is more important, but I think that unity isn't actually, like, beneficial, or isn't actually, like, biblical unity isn't right when there isn't a purity going on, when it's not pure. So I would say that unity that is apart from sound Christian doctrine is not proper unity. Yeah, oh yeah.
I would, my vote would be purity ahead of unity. And my concept with it, without giving it a lot of thought, is when man's hands get involved in something, it typically, over the course of time, doesn't go well. I'll give an example, like when TV was first invented. TV used to be, we would watch it maybe an hour a day, and we see what it's become. That's just a quick example, but purity, I think, if you have, especially actual beginning of time purity, when church first formed, and you take to today, we see all the tentacles that have branched off of purity. And unity really causes that, because now man tries to impress man and have all the answers and follow me, and my thinking is this, and I believe scripture says it this way, and this, and tentacles happen. Whereas if you can get right to actual purity and stay there, which we know by history is impossible, but I think I would take purity ahead of unity.
Take it back. I was just going to actually pose a question to everybody, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. Jordan, when the church started, was that the purest the church has ever been? Like, what frame of reference do we have on that? Like, Michael has something to say.
No, I was just going to say, if you want to say something, raise your hand so I can't do the mic.
Because I think that's a common sentiment, but it's not necessarily a historical sentiment. So,
I usually talk loud enough I don't even need the mic, but there's the conundrum. If you get to the beginning of purity, so if we take the Trinity, at wherever that start was, which is another question, but if we take it all the way back to the beginning of the Trinity, that's pure. As pure
and unified.
And unified. And I think with purity comes unification. And where the divisions happen is when people think that they know more than the person that is purporting part of that purity.
What if they do know more?
Then you're going to have unity. Because I believe what you're saying, and I'm going to listen to you next week, and then I'm going to listen to you next week. But if I don't find it, I've had this conversation a couple times with Jordan where I find some churches that I have gone to, for example, I find it to be very much a production. It's about the lights have to be a certain way, and we've got to rehearse the song for 2 weeks to make it just, I would rather have it more right from the heart and see all the failings, and I will follow that. And I find that in that purity, it's more heartfelt, it's more meant for me. They don't necessarily get hung up on their failings or their flaws, and I find a lot of power in that. But our conundrum nowadays is to get back to that. We're so far from it that I don't know how we get back to there.
Jordan, what was the worst time in church history?
I think it was Constantine was the worst time. Yep. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. I do. Yeah, I think that it was the beginnings of the worst time in history.
So it wasn't the worst time?
Okay. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, it's hard to know when it was like, oh, here we go. Like, yeah, it can't get worse than this. But I think the decision to integrate church and state was the worst time. Maybe in light of that, a question that I was pondering this week, and this might ruffle feathers, but that's okay. Do you think that the world is getting better or worse? This is going to be for everybody too? Worse.
Worse.
Okay. Why, Jacqueline?
Okay,
why
I'll give the mic over here. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Worse.
Okay.
I don't know, just think of how many, and maybe I'm wrong. For my stance, I would even just say the abortion rates that are through the roof, people who are living together and not married, sexual sin, we are becoming Sodom and Gomorrah. Everything they did there, people are doing now. So I guess, if we're Sodom and Gomorrah, we're not worse because that already happened.
Little Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sorry, that's what I feel like. We are. That's sorry.
Okay, yep, yeah. Who else?
Jacqueline.
Somebody else? Did you? Yeah, you.
Julie.
Okay,
Wait, Julie.
yeah.
Oh, my word.
Just exactly for that reason. No, not exactly for that reason. But I feel like all that we have learned up to this point, maybe the world isn't getting better, but the church, I think this is the best time for the church. Because the church has been learning from its mistakes.
Allegedly.
Sorry, what?
Allegedly learning.
I believe the church is learning from its mistakes. And I feel like there's more hope for, just revival than there ever was before. Maybe it's because there's more people in the world than there ever were before. That's why it feels like it's the worst of times, but it is the best of times. So it's actually the best of times and the worst of times.
Jesse.
I think often when we come to this, it depends on whether we're contrarian or not, because I feel like I hear the world is getting worse, so I want to say it's getting better, but if everybody was saying it was getting better, I'd probably say it was getting worse. I think if you would take our southeastern Manitoba, like right what's in front of us, we can see lots of things that are getting worse, because 50 years ago, everybody went to church, and now very few people go to church. And the sin of the world is creeping in, and our kids are walking away from the faith and whatever. But if you look at the whole world, yeah, the church is exploding in some places. It might be decaying here, but it's exploding somewhere else. So if we're not the center of the universe, maybe on a whole it's better in some places. Some sins have actually dramatically decreased. Some are on the rise. I don't know. I think we just see what's right in front of us, and the sins that really bother us, if they're going up, the world is going down. I don't know. It's hard to be objective about it.
Randy.
Good job, Randy.
Always looking to I'm always looking to impress Michael. I'm going to squash this once and for all, and that is, it has to be getting worse. Otherwise, there wouldn't be Armageddon. We're heading to Armageddon. It can't be getting better.
Thanks for ripping off that.
How
Band-Aid.
about that?
Jesse kind of said what I was going to say. Like, if you look at the global church, like, if you look at India and China and some countries in Africa and South America, the church is, like, booming. And, like, in the Muslim world, there's a lot of really great things happening with people, like, turning to Christ. But I think the Western world is maybe suffering. But with that, like, I think there has been, like, more of a purification that is happening. Even if the church is struggling, I think, like, less people, even with, like, things like abortion and MAID and all of that, are causing people to, like, think more about what they believe instead of just saying, I'm a Christian, but not taking it seriously.
We've talked about how it's the Christianity exploding in some third world countries in like Africa and Middle East and Muslims. But an interesting thing, this goes to some of the stuff that I was preparing for a different question that Jordan was going to ask me, but I thought now would be a good time. So the Bible Society did a survey in England and in Wales, specifically in young adults. And from 2018, in 2018, only 4% of young adults said they actually went to church. And in 2024, it's jumped up to 16%. And so there is something happening right around now with people and with, I think people are looking for answers and people are coming to church. And so that's awesome, for one. And I think, we shouldn't lose too much hope. And that's in a Western, that's ahead of us, essentially, right? England was the ultimate Western country, then they moved to North America. And so we're just one step behind where England is. And they are actually seeing a spike in people going to church.
Praise the Lord.
I would caution against using church attendance as a good measure. I think it's really good for people to have relationships with God. And I think that that happens in churches, but I also think people are pulled into churches either by their families and don't want to be here and aren't really growing in their relationship with God in some cases. And then in some communities, it's a very political thing. It's very important to be in church for political reasons or power reasons. So some of those things are troubling. I think the whole question of is the world a better place right now? And then I think it's different to ask the question, like, do we have more people who have relationships with God? That's probably the question that we want to ask, and that's what we want to see. We want to see more people in good relationship with God. And I don't think that equates to the world being a better place or a worse place.
Can I say something that might get me in trouble? I think that sometimes we look at our history as either like a steep downhill decline. It's either a steep downhill decline into hell, or it's actually like a slow incline. Things are getting better or things are getting worse. And I don't know if that is always a great metric to base it off of. I think a better image to look at would be like a roller coaster, where there's just like these high points and then these low points, and they just like keep going up and down. As you look at church history, for example, church specifically, because that's what we've been studying, there are these high and low points. And I don't always know if we can say, if it's helpful for us to say that the world is always getting worse. Because sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. As I was reflecting on things like the Inquisition, like the Crusades, the Black Plague. Those were really, really bad times in our history. And I think that some of the things that are going on in our world right now are quite bad, but like, what is the metric that we're using for what's good and what's bad? And what's more bad than the Inquisition? Or what's better than whatever, a different part of church history, like the Reformation? So I wonder, yeah. What do you think?
I have no idea. My default would be something what you're talking about with it being a roller coaster of ups and downs. And like you said, you can see that through church history, up and down and up and down. I think one of the questions that we had, me and Jordan were texting back and forth this week on what questions we're going to ask. And one of them was like kind of what did we learn as we taught? And one of the things that really solidified for me was just these ups and downs in church history, like just vicious. He talks about the Inquisition, the Black Plague, like some really bad times. And I if I was in the Black Plague era, in that 1300 scenario, everybody's dying, the church can do nothing, and they keep going, doubling down. We just got off the Crusades. Like, I would think the world's ending. I don't know about you, but I would be like, it's over, pack her in, it is over. And I would have never thought that my ancestors would ever get to the point where we are here. And for me, it's a startling, like, question mark. When I'm sitting here in church talking to you, running water, right, all these luxuries we're living in right now, under a roof, and is the world getting better or worse? Well, I can tell you from my point of view, it is amazing. And then you talk about the morality. Yeah, morality's down, but if you look back at church history, there's a ton of times where it was just as bad. Does that mean that we shouldn't attack that morality and we shouldn't stand against it? No. It's just a check for me to say, okay, let's not overreact. Let's not like, oh, the world is ending. I don't know. It could be, could not be. But let's do what's right in front of us right now. Yeah. And, oh, actually, I'm going to say, can I say one more thing before? Because Randy raised his hand, and I was going to comment on what Randy said. In this question, okay, I just want you to all think about this. And Jordan's, me and Jordan talked a lot about this too, which might get you in trouble, but it might get me in trouble. In this question, just understand that your framework on how you view the end times is going to play a factor in how you answer this question. And it plays a huge role. And in church history, there are many theologians that have differing views on that, right? And so there's not just like one way to view that. And so let's have a little bit of understanding on that, because that framework, the way you view the end times, what that looks like, will very quickly tell me how you're interpreting the world events right now. Because there's people that I respect on both sides that say the world's getting worse and the world's getting better, and they're both excellent theologians, Bible studiers. They're great people, but they're saying that because they believe of this, but yet they're looking at the same events in the world. So just understand that.
Oh, there's so much to unpack. Back in the day when I was teaching Sunday school, I gave a concept out there that man, by man I mean all humans, struggle with things that we can't quantify. So it's all about numbers to us. And it really is not about numbers to God. God, it's a complete number to God. All of us belong to him. But I was going to say, I wasn't joking about the world's getting worse when I said we're headed to Armageddon, but the Bible also says that there is great revival before then. So there's the peak. So if we're going to go through a great revival, you would think, well, wouldn't that please God, and maybe he'll delay Armageddon, something along those lines, but there will be a great revival before that day. Yeah. And then just when you'd mentioned about theologians, Dustin, we could put 10 theologians up there in front of us and have 4 or 5 different concepts. So yes, they're very learned people, but I will always default to a heartfelt, what I feel is heartfelt and is meaning for me, not for them per se. And that's our society nowadays. I think that's why the world is really messed up, because we have no trust in anyone anymore. It is really, really hard to find that person or that message other than the Bible. And there's many people out there searching for that answer without the Bible. Yeah. So they're getting millions of different answers.
I think I'm fairly pragmatic, or I'm concerned with what this means for what we do. And if the world is getting worse or if it's getting better, and like you guys have said, there's a bunch of times where it was really getting bad and the world it could have ended then and it would have made sense. And we could be heading there now, or maybe we've got a few more ups and downs before that. But if we, in the midst of that, if our view of the world is it's just all burning down and so we should run away from it, that is not helpful. And if the world's getting better, to be apathetic about it isn't good. either way, we have a beautiful hope, and we actually are living in victory. The victory has been won, and it's just going to be finalized. And so if the world's burning down, good. Let's go out in joy and hope, not crushed by the world, and go and reach out with the light we have. If it's getting better, let's press the advantage before the roller coaster points down again. If we have hope regardless, and I can feel myself kind of sometimes crushed by it's so dark, or have an evening at the drop-in where it's like, man, this is so sad seeing these kids all burning their lives down. But we've got hope, we got victory, and we can step out confidently in that victory, regardless of which way the roller coaster is pointed.
I wanted to just maybe ask you one last question, Dustin, and I think this will probably lead us to the end of our time. When we look at our culture today, what do you think are some cultural events that are happening that are shaping our church?
As I've meditated on this question and answer, and as Jordan posed some questions to me and I posed some questions to him this week, I felt a little bit inadequate in some of these, specifically because of the echo chambers that we live in. I don't know if you've experienced this. I know I can see it pretty clearly. Like, YouTube feeds you what you like to watch. Facebook feeds you what you've clicked on, right? Like the ads, like I search one thing up in Google, and the next 15 ads are about the thing that I just searched, right? And so it's like, okay, how can you put your finger on, the church as a whole, the church in North America, or what's going on when you have kind of this isolated, very, like, you're just getting fed what you want to be fed. But regardless of that, I say that pretty much as an acknowledgement of just my inability to say, here's the survey and this is what it says about where the church and the culture's at. But I think one thing that I've really witnessed as I've dug into church history, and I've dug into apologetics, and I do this daily, and there's some interesting things happening. And it goes back to that survey I just read about how there's more young adults coming to church. There's something happening. And if you want to think about it, does anybody remember the new atheists? That term, new atheists? Anybody? 1, 2? Okay. So this was a movement in the early 2000s. It's like 2000, 2010, in that movement. Maybe you could, whatever. It's kind of I'm not going to nail down, but in that time period, there was a number of atheists that really attacked Christianity, like a lot, and did it in a dogmatic, vicious way, I would say. Like there was no like, oh, let's talk about these ideas. They were coming at it. Christianity was dumb, and it's going to hurt the world, and we need to go to atheism because that's the answer, right? We have the science, we have the knowledge, we have the wisdom. We can go there. And so in my upbringing, when I was growing up, going to youth group occasionally and different things like that, the questions that were being asked were a lot of these questions answering the new atheists, right? They were apologetic questions of like the logic of, how do we know God exists? And, is there any scientific backing to what God does? And how can there be miracles? And like some of these types of things, right? And so that's what I grew up in. But in the last 10 years, like the new atheists have almost disappeared. They've almost disappeared. And people aren't really taking what they have to say very strongly anymore. There seems to be this shift away from this dogmatic scientific mode of thinking, more to a moral question. I was listening to a podcast of an apologist, and I'm forgetting his name, so you have to forgive me on that. But he's been doing apologetics at university campuses for, I don't know, 40 years or something, like a long, long time. And he commented, and I can see this just in my own experience, a shift in his question. For the first 20 or 30 years, the questions were like the reasons for God, right? The cosmological argument and different things like that. And all of a sudden, there's been a shift to not so much prove to me that God exists. I acknowledge that God exists. Now, prove to me that his morality matches my morality. And it's very interesting. And like Bethany went to school, and the questions that she got in those 2 years almost had nothing to do with proving that God exists. Everybody there kind of just assumed there is a higher being. But I don't believe in Bethany's God because, what about the genocide in the Old Testament? And so there seems to be this openness. And so when we go to that survey in the Church of England, or not the Church of England, but the church in England and Wales where young adults are seeing increase, it's interesting. People are interested in God. There's a presupposition of God's existence starting to leach in, I guess. Anybody heard the name Wes Huff? I feel like if you're on YouTube and you're interested in theology, that's been popping up a ton. And he's a little bit in my own echo chamber. But this is a Christian apologist / historian / language expert. Okay? And he had this kind of viral incident with this one guy that really took off, and he kind of dismantled this whole person's argument on live television, essentially. And all of a sudden, he's been getting a ton of traction. And so if he went on, if you're not a podcaster, you won't know, if you don't listen to podcasts, you won't know these names, but he went on like Joe Rogan and Flagrant and some of these very secular, very, very secular, some of the biggest podcasts in the world for like 3 hours talking about why Christianity is right and what you believe is wrong, essentially, in a nice way, but he talked for hours in these things. And it's like, what? Like 10, 15 years ago, we would have never had that. No one in the world would have ever sat there and listened to someone who's a Christian talk about Christianity and ask him questions for 3 hours. Right? And so it's like, I'm not stating more than what that is, but it's like, oh, that's interesting. Church attendance. There's another post on the New York Post. They posted something, this was probably half a year ago, the increase in young men going to Greek Orthodox churches. It's like, oh, this is a secular publisher talking about how young men are going to the Greek Orthodox church, and it's starting to blow up. I'm like, oh my word. So there's something, I just want to say this because I think there's something happening, and we just need to be attuned to it as a church as we go forward. Because there seems to be a shift that's happening. Russell Brand, does anybody know the name Russell Brand? If you watch any of his movies, you're probably not a Christian. I'm kidding, but they can get a little raunchy at times. And he also became a Christian, or that's what he said, right? Joe Rogan, after being on, or Wes Huff being on Joe Rogan, he now has said that he's going to church. Is he a Christian? I don't know. But he says he's going to church. And so there's something happening, and I don't know what it is. And this is, I think, goes back to, sorry, I'm just rambling. I'm not rambling. This is meaningful, but I'm sorry. You asked what the best time in church history was. And for me, what spoke to me was that moment with Constantine. And the reason is because I feel like we're living in that moment again. There seems to be something happening where the Christianity is starting to be looked on as a good thing again. It's starting to be looked on as, if we want the world to be good, it's the Christian way. You listen to Jordan Peterson, if you ever listen to Jordan Peterson, he talks about Christianity in this, like, good for society way, not like Jesus literally rose, but good for society. And that's kind of leaking in. Everybody's kind of like, oh yeah, Christianity, that's the right thing to do. And so I don't know where that leads us. I don't know how long that's going to last. But I would encourage you to keep your ears open to this, because I think there's a shift happening. People are open to God, and like Jesse said, I think now's a time to push your advantage, because I think people would be open to it, right? The thought leaders of today are starting to be open to it and starting to talk about Christianity. So now's our time.
I had shared in a Sunday school teaching one time, this is going to be about 20 years ago, but it's so relevant to what you've just said, and that is a survey was done, and I can't remember, I've still been trying to find it because I had all the information. It was probably the best Sunday school class I ever got involved in. And it was either North American or world, but anyway, they interviewed 10 of the richest people, I'm going to say, in North America. And all 10 were asked separately, so that one didn't influence the other, what they would be willing to give their riches up for. And the overwhelming answer was to definitively 100% know that there is a heaven. Isn't that the question today even? And the majority of those 10, that's what they said they would give up their riches for. And it's so in line with what you're saying today. I think people are, with money or without, are starting to see that money really doesn't give the answer, and they're searching more. But it was a legitimate, and I got to find it again. I used to have it, and it's funny how you get rid of stuff like that that is so meaningful. I don't know where I've put it, but I'll find it, and yep.
Well, you guys, this has been a great time, and I think, I can probably speak for Dustin as well. We just have really enjoyed the opportunity to teach to you guys and to learn this on our own. We're excited to start wrestling through what the fall will look like for Sunday school and what are some different series we want to explore. We're definitely open to hearing from you guys. If you haven't filled out that survey, a questionnaire online, please do so. We'd love to hear some feedback. We hope that you guys have a wonderful summer. Just a reminder, this is the end of Sunday school for the year, and we'll start up again in September. So, go in peace, everyone.